The crowd in front of the royal palace in Madrid suddenly froze. Something was wrong. A broad-shouldered man with a bull neck and a rough face covered with prison tattoos was slowly but surely approaching the royal guard. He chewed carelessly on a match, grinning with the self-assurance of a man accustomed to intimidating others. Raul El Toro Mendoza. He was a legend in the underworld. After serving 10 years for armed assault, he had recently been released, but prison had taught him nothing. On the contrary, he became even more violent. Today, he was looking for a way to demonstrate his power, and he found the perfect target. The guardsman stood like a statue, tall, in his red uniform, with his musket drawn, unmoving, no emotion. "Look, Sanchez, there's a real man for you." El Toro chuckled, nudging his buddy in the side. "Standing there like a Christmas toy? Let's see if he's even alive, shall we?" He stepped forward, tapping his boots deliberately loudly on the paving stones. The crowd gasped. Someone picked up a phone. The tourists had seen people shouting in the guardsmen's faces, trying to make them laugh, but no one had done it yet. El Toro stopped in a crouch. A cruel spark lit up in his eyes. He reached out and grabbed his musket, and a second later, he realized he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. "What are you, a piece of plastic?" El Toro shouted, kneading his chest after the blow. His face was bloodshot from pain, but more from humiliation. The guardsman didn't move, didn't look at him, didn't react. The crowd around him began to whisper. Some of the tourists were already taking video. There was tension in the air. Everyone knew the man wasn't going to stop. "You think you're tough, don't you?" El Toro laughed hoarsely, licking his lips. His fists clenched. "Standing there like a mannequin. Well, let's see how you like it." He stepped forward sharply and shoved the guardsman forcefully in the shoulder. The man in the red uniform swayed, but did not fall. Didn't even look up. "Doesn't that bother you?" El Toro grimaced. "Then let's try this." The crowd gasped as he snatched his bear hat off the guardsman's head and tossed it defiantly to the ground. "What? Now you're just a dude in a stupid uniform." He laughed. The guardsman stood like a stone statue. But something had changed. The fingers on the musket clenched tighter. "Hey, asshole, are you even alive?" El Toro's voice was filled with anger. He raised his hat and stepped on it defiantly with a dirty boot. "Speak up, soldier boy, or are you just a robot?" "Step back." The guardsman's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. El Toro flinched. He hadn't expected the man to speak. "What did you say?" He narrowed his eyes. "Step back. Now." The crowd held its breath. "Damn you." El Toro shouted and punched the guard in the shoulder. The sentry's body twitched, and he moved again. It all happened in a split second. The rifle flashed in motion. The thud of the buttstock against his chest knocked El Toro to the ground. He collapsed flat on the stone paving stones, breathing heavily. The crowd shrieked. Someone shouted, "God, did he kill him?" But El Toro was alive. He rose slowly, trembling with rage. "You're going to die for this, you bastard." He jumped forward and didn't notice the butt of the musket was already pointed right at his face. El Toro froze, his whole life flashing before his eyes. That sound, the metallic click of the bolt being pulled, he knew it all too well. Had heard it in the alleyways when they'd fought over guns instead of fists. Had heard it in prison when the guards showed him who was boss. But never did he think he'd hear it from a goddamn palace guard. "Kneel." The guard spoke calmly, but there was something in his voice that made a chill run down his spine. The crowd gasped again. Someone hastily hid the phone, afraid that something truly terrifying was about to begin. El Toro swallowed. His eyes were frantically darting around. He had 2 seconds to decide. Either he would take a step back or take his chances. "You wouldn't dare." El Toro's voice trembled. But he wasn't so sure anymore. The guardsman did not move, but now his weapon was no longer a mere trappings of ceremony. It had become a part of him. It lived in his hands as an extension of his body. El Toro felt the crowd's attitude change. A second ago he had been the king here, formidable, defiant, ready to humiliate. And now? Now he was prey. "You're finished," he bellowed, trying to regain control of the situation. "They'll sue you. You'll go to jail. Do you hear me?" The guardsman was silent. "Do you hear me?" wailed El Toro, but panic was already in his voice. On knees. He was no longer giving orders. He was putting a stop to it. El Toro realized he had backed himself into a corner. If he attacked, he'd be shot. If he surrendered, he'd be humiliated in front of everyone. And suddenly, there was a third option. A few meters away, behind the backs of tourists, stood Police Guardia Real, Royal Police. They had seen everything. El Toro grinned. That's it, soldier boy. Now you're fucked. He held up his hands in innocence. Officers, this psycho's shooting at me. But the guardsman didn't even think of lowering his musket. Put your hands up, now, shouted one of the cops, pointing a gun at El Toro. The bandit was stunned. What? You're under arrest for assaulting a Royal Guardsman. El Toro realized everything in an instant. He wasn't a victim. He had just attacked the king's representative. And now he had to answer for it. What? El Toro froze, his smug grin gone. He couldn't believe his ears. Did you even see what happened here? That asshole in the suit. On your knees, shouted one of the officers as he approached, pointing a gun at his forehead. The weapon was now pointed not at the guardsman, but at himself. The crowd gasped. No, you don't understand. El Toro raised his hands, his voice trembling. I did nothing of the sort. He was the first. You attacked a royal guard. The officer thundered. This is an attack on a representative of the crown. Get on your knees immediately and put your hands behind your head. El Toro knew that if he did not obey now, he would be shot right here. But the crowd was watching. Hundreds of eyes. Cameras. Are you serious? He tried to speak calmly, but his voice shook. He took a step back. Click. The second officer took the gun off the safety. On. Knees. Now. There were no more options now. El Toro clenched his teeth, his heart pounding frantically. He had lost. Go down in front of a crowd? In front of the tourists? In front of that damn soldier? But a bullet to the head was worse. He plowed heavily to his knees, clenching his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. Hands on his head. His hands trembled. But he did as he was told. The handcuffs clicked. The crowd roared. Some applauded. Some shouted. Serves him right. And the guardsman? He didn't even move. He just stood there. No emotion. No celebration. As if it was meant to be. You asshole, you're going to regret this. El Toro hissed as the police officers lifted him to his feet. Handcuffs dug into his wrists. He twitched, but the officers squeezed him tighter. Easy, amigo. One of the officers, Sergeant Ruiz, grinned at the detainee. You've already lost. Are you stupid? El Toro choked with anger. Didn't you see that asshole attack me? I saw you grab his musket. Ruiz grinned. Do you have any idea what you did? El Toro froze. You tried to take the weapon away from a royal guard. So what? El Toro snapped at him. He's just a doll in a uniform. Those guns aren't even real. Ruiz leaned closer, his smirk gone. Do you want to check it out? El Toro swallowed. He remembered the sound of the bolt clicking. Remembered how the cold metal of the musket had frozen against his face. And for the first time all day, he felt not anger, but fear. Listen, his voice settled, quieter. He took a deep breath. Can we work something out? I'm just overreacting a little, aren't I? No hard feelings? No hard feelings? The officer grinned restrainedly. You assaulted a serviceman, tried to take away his weapon. This isn't just a street fight, amigo. El Toro squirmed. I can't go to jail for this. Oh, they will. He jerked, but the cops pressed his face hard into the hood of the squad car. Hey, he yelled. Did you think this was all a circus? Ruiz said calmly, pawing his arms higher. That you could do whatever you wanted? El Toro tried his best to retain the remnants of his pride, but he had already lost. The crowd dispersed. People were making videos. Somewhere, children were laughing. And the guard? He just stood there, as if none of this had anything to do with him. The metal of the handcuffs crashed painfully into his wrists. El Toro gritted his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. The crowd around him dispersed slowly, keeping their eyes on him. Some kept filming, some laughed, and some just whispered, shaking their heads. What an idiot. What a fool, messing around with a guard. Did you think he was entertaining tourists? El Toro heard every word. His face was burning with rage and humiliation. He was angry at himself for letting this happen. He was the master of the streets. A thug that even the toughest guys in his neighborhood shook in front of. But now? Now he was a nobody. Cop Ruiz shoved him forward, forcing him to walk toward the patrol car. Okay, enough of his show. Let's go. What? El Toro roared, twitching. You're not going to put me in jail for this. It's just, well, a little thing. Ruiz snorted. A little thing? He stopped, turned to him, and leaned in so that their faces were level. You asshole just tried to take a soldier's weapon away from him. Do you realize what that means? Come on, it's just a ceremonial costume. It's not like they're even. Ruiz grabbed him sharply by the collar and hissed, "These guys have been in combat. They've been through hot spots. You wouldn't last 5 minutes next to them." El Toro tried to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. The cop unfastened his collar and pushed him forward again. "Get in the car." No, wait." El Toro shook his head desperately. "Let's make a deal. I can. Well, fine, community service." Ruiz smirked. "Don't you get it yet? You're fucked." El Toro felt real fear for the first time in his life. Prison didn't scare him, but insulting a royal guard? That's a whole different story. He didn't know what to do. He was shoved into the car, the door slammed. But before the car started, he took one last look at the guardsman. He was just as he was, head high, the base of his musket resting firmly on the paving stones. Not a single emotion, as if nothing had happened, like El Toro never existed. And that was the scariest thing that had happened all day. The patrol car moved smoothly, driving El Toro away. He sat in the back seat, breathing heavily, his wrists aching from the handcuffs, but the pain inside was worse. "How much do I get?" He squeezed out, looking at the cop Ruiz in the rearview mirror. Ruiz tilted his head slightly, as if surprised that the dumbass was finally beginning to realize the consequences. "At least a year. Maybe 2. A year." El Toro's throat went dry. "You attacked a guardsman. You tried to take his weapon. You got off easy. But I didn't know he could hit." Ruiz chuckled. "Now you do." El Toro leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Everything had come crashing down. Had gotten out of prison less than a year ago, and he was already going back in. What the fuck? He just wanted to play to the crowd, humiliate this soldier boy, show everyone who's boss. And now? Now he's not even human. Now he's a mistake. Outside, the tourists scattered, but at the royal palace, everything remained as before. A guardsman stood at his post. His red uniform was still immaculate, his hands still fixed on his musket, as if nothing had happened, as if El Toro had never existed. This moment was the worst for him. He wasn't shouted after, cursed, mocked, just erased from reality like an insignificant smudge on the glass. And suddenly he realized no one was afraid of him. Ever. Everything he prided himself on was the ostensible fear of weaklings. But in the face of real power, he was nothing. Ruiz noticed his face and smirked. "Remember this day, amigo. It has changed you." The car turned the corner, and the royal palace disappeared from sight. But El Toro knew that guard would stand there forever, and him, he would rot behind bars.